Well, hi everybody. It's Monday the 13th of April, Easter Monday, and it's a bit of a grayer day today, so haven't been out for too long. Been out for a little bit just with the dog, but nothing more than that. It's a bit cooler today as well. So, first thing, let's go through the second shelf of my reading on my bookshelf here in my room. Okay, I just thought I'd run through the second shelf of books in terms of my collection and what I read. Let's start from this side. Another reference book, history book, which is it was published with the support of the BBC. Simon Schama, a famous author. You've seen him on TV, I'm sure. Certainly on sort of like Andrew Marr, and he's been on Question Time. He's a good commentator of history, and this is a good book he bought. The History of Britain at the Edge of the World. It was. He's got several books out. This one I recommend in particular. I've got about 3 or 4 of his books. Just get that one out. Whoops. Put this in. This is another book. I've got a particular interest in the First World War. A.J.P. Taylor. This is an illustrated history of the First World War. There's some. Again, it's a book with quite a few old photographs in it. I've had this book quite a long time, but it's a good reference to history of how things developed just before the First World War, and then basically covering the events of the First World War. So again, as you can see, I've got quite a lot of books on history. I won't go into too much detail on this one because I have spoken about it many times before. This is Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If there's any book I would recommend for anybody to read, it would be this one. I was introduced to this book in 1989 at work in South Africa, but I've even put a reference to it in here. I was first introduced to this book in 1989 in Cape Town, South Africa. It is a truly wonderful book of wisdom on life, and I would suggest it is the most important read for anyone who opens it. That's for the future, for anybody who picks this book up in a charity shop somewhere when I'm long gone. Then we have one I've mentioned last time. I'm particularly fond of Michael Palin and his travels and his adventures. In fact, I've got, apart from his books like this one, Michael Palin Himalaya, I've got the CD collection of some of his programs as well, Himalaya being one of them, where he joins up several countries: China, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, with his trip across the Himalayas. And here's another one of his series. This is on New Europe. One of his more recent, I think it was his last. No, his last one was Brazil, wasn't it? Anyway, another good book, illustration. And there's another one, Michael Palin again. Around the World in 80 Days. Again, it was a television documentary series as well, and this is the book. I've also got the videos on this one as well. And then another one, Michael Palin, Pole to Pole. Good books, well written, well presented. The documentaries that are on TV that you can get on, I'm sure you can find them these days on box set somewhere, on YouTube or Amazon, somewhere. But good books, and also well written by Michael himself. And obviously the presentations on the TV series are also very good. Here's an interesting book, Gurkha. It's a story of a It reads like a novel, a thriller, but it's actually a true story of a young man who made the career in the Gurkhas. Talks about his life when he was living out, out in his village, and goes on to talk about his introduction into the Gurkhas, how he was selected, what he did, how he made it the army his life, British Army his life. Very good book indeed. Talks about the conflict, some of the conflicts he was involved in as well. I'm not going to get all these books. Michael Palin again. This is another one of his diaries, set of diaries. Forgotten Voices. This is another First World War book, again written by Max Arthur. Very, very well put together. Talks about the Somme in detail. Talks about some of the other significant reported tragedies that took place during the First World War on the Western Front. Another one of John Simpson. If you recall, I talked about John Simpson up on the above shelf. This is another one of his great books, The War Against Saddam. It's again, this is on the road to taking the hard road to Baghdad. As I think I mentioned to you before, he interviewed Saddam Hussein several times at the Imperial Palace in Baghdad. And Saddam opened up his doors to John Simpson from the UK, British BBC, fairly regularly to get his stories out there. Wilbur Smith again. I was talked about Wilbur Smith last time as well. Here's a couple more of his books here. Again, Africa. This one's about Africa, the Saiga, and then here's one about called The Tiger's Prey, which goes through Africa, India. And again, it's a ripping story, very good story. Then we have a book that I'm not ashamed to say I think it was pretty good. It's Tony Blair's biography, really, on his journey coming up to becoming Prime Minister. What can I say about this book, really? This one was a disappointing read compared with the other book I'm going to show you. I thought I'd enjoy this book when I bought it. But on reading it, although the facts were interesting, I didn't find it a particularly invigorating read. A book I did find very interesting, and probably because the man himself was more of a writer, journalist, is the Alistair Campbell Diaries, The Blair Years. This one is a good book. I recommend this book to anybody as well. And it's Alistair Campbell's memoirs of Tony Blair, really, in that era when he was Prime Minister, when Campbell was part of the team there. So yeah, good book. Oh right, now this is something that may be of interest to you. This is Fatal Weekend by Tom Ruberthan. Tom Ruberthan happens to be my cousin. He's his family, yes, and he is a author and publisher. He has his own publishing company down south in Northampton called Myrtle Press. But he's written quite a number of books, predominantly about motor racing drivers. He's written The Fatal Weekend. This is one of the actual weekend of Senna. But he also wrote one before this, Senna, which is probably one of his better sellers, which goes into intricate detail of the life of Senna. Fatal Weekend is, it just sums it up. This is a picture of Tom here. As I say, a cousin of mine, so I've got a few of his books around the house. Yeah, here's another one, in fact. This is James Hunt. And you see it's an author's signed copy because oops. I do tend to get the books that I get from Tom signed. Yeah, that one's signed. James Hunt. This is an interesting book, actually. James Hunt, he died really a pauper. James Hunt, as you know, well, I don't know if you do know if you don't know motor racing, James Hunt was a bit of a public school playboy who was a good motor racing driver, and he was taken under the wing of Lord Hesketh. Hesketh, who had his estate down in Northamptonshire, fairly close to Silverstone. And Lord Hesketh's dream was always to have a car in the British in the Grand Prix circuit, on the Grand Prix circuit, that was British totally, 100% British, with no sponsorship on it whatsoever. British car, British built, with a British driver. And it was called the Hesketh. And he put a lot of his money into this car. Well, first of all, he had it in Formula 2, and James won the Formula 2 championship with him. He was the driver. And then he got into Formula 1, and he had the Hesketh car in Formula 1. And I think he won a couple of races in the Hesketh. It was always fairly competitive, but not quite as good as the Ferraris and the McLarens in those days, and the Tyrrells. And anyway, it's a story of shunt, because he had a habit of crashing quite a lot, hence the title. And when James Hunt then moved away from Hesketh in the end, Hesketh basically ran out of money, and he joined McLaren, and he had that famous bout of competitiveness with Niki Lauda, and James Hunt then won the World Championship with McLaren, to prove he was a very, very good driver. And he later then retired. When he retired from motor racing, he became a commentator for the BBC with Murray Walker as his assistant in commentating a lot of the races. And he eventually died of a heart attack. He became a little bit... He became very interested in budgerigars, little bit, yeah. So that was his passion was in the end. But an interesting read. Tom is a writer. So he does create the stories quite well, but his particular skill is in research. Is the information the detail he gets from references, interviewing people that tell him things about the band, is what is interesting about this book. And then we have the dictionary, Collins Dictionary. Every house should have one, I believe. Shall I go through the next shelf? No, I won't. I'll leave that for another day. Well, we're into the starting the fourth week of the lockdown now. So I've had just over 3 weeks in this room, basically. Obviously I come out of this room, but as you know, because with Richie working in the NHS, when this whole thing kicked off sort of just over 3 weeks ago, we thought, right, okay, so that we can remain relatively safe from each other's passing of the potential virus, etc., we'll split ourselves up in terms of how we live in the house. So obviously we see it with each other every day, but we are keeping distance. So one of the punishments was we sleep in separate rooms. So I moved this temporary bed into my study, squeezed everything around a little bit, and have been sleeping. So I don't go upstairs, other than take them up a cup of coffee in the morning. But other than that, I'm living downstairs. The bathroom, I've got the shower and everything down here as well, my own shower and bathroom. So I'm okay in that respect. To try and ensure we don't catch the bug. I mean, obviously we catch the bug, we'll deal with the bug, but the idea is to play the game of being as safe as we possibly can. So, like I said, Richie has her bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, and so she can take care of all her needs quite easily in there. Roxanne and Mikey have their own bedrooms as well, and they also have their own bathroom, so they take care of their requirements. And then obviously I'm down here and I have my own requirements. So this is the fourth week we're going into now of this particular lockdown. Interesting discussions going on at the moment as to how to manage how we come out of this lockdown, and what we do to try and get to some kind of normality. Well, you've had all my thoughts on it in the past. The good thing is we can observe where other people are in this process, like China, who've been out of the first wave for a few weeks now, and there's reports coming in of a second set of infections starting off in China, coming in. Well, they're saying they're coming in from people coming in from abroad who are bringing the virus in with them. Whether that is the case or not, I don't know. China's a difficult one to read against, because the 3,000 odd deaths that took place in Wuhan mainly, one will never really know if that was the true figure. It certainly is a lot of deaths, so you would think, well, the Chinese, would they worry whether it was 3,000 or 6,000? But what clearly doesn't stack up for me is when I look at the number of deaths that are in Europe, in particular Italy, Spain, and where we are in the UK, where obviously the death toll has been higher than China and the United States as well. And it, to me, comes from travel more than anything else. When I look at the countries, Italy, Milan, and in particular, and in Spain, Barcelona area in particular, obviously in our case London, the amount of air traffic that goes in and out of these locations is significant to world standards of everywhere else, and therefore people are carrying this disease in from other parts of the world. And a lot of people in the UK do travel around the world significantly, as do a lot of people from Spain and Italy. The German scenario is a little bit strange, in as much as they haven't got the same amount of deaths as the other main players in Europe. They have now, the situation with that is based on how they've been testing from day one to isolate the disease in certain areas of the country, and therefore have been able to manage it better. They've sort of isolated it to certain locations, controlled it better, and haven't had the problems that the rest of, they still had a lockdown, but they've also been able to isolate it and manage the disease a lot better. Now, the main theory from the certain experts about Germany is because of their diagnostic industry. They have a large diagnostic industry that is around the world and works in other countries as well, but they've controlled that diagnostics industry from Germany, and therefore been able to analyse and react to quickly where the problems are. The UK, although we've got good scientists, and we've got good scientists who understand things, all types of viruses. Our universities are ranked best in the world. Imperial College is a leading college in viruses, but we haven't had the diagnostic ability for control, which we've now set up, and we've also created a whole new industry in the last few weeks purely by getting this right. So it is going to come on stream. Criticism is to me, it's far too early to say, could we have avoided this? Of course we could have avoided it. We could have locked the whole country down in January and said nobody's going out, nobody's coming in. But if we'd have done that in January, it would have been regarded as ridiculous, and we would have been the politicians would have been taken to task, and it would have, in hindsight, it's always wonderful to judge something, isn't it? When you've got hindsight, it's all very, very good. So I think I can't blame any country for being wrong. Italy was unfortunate; it hit the Italians first, purely by chance. A lot of Italians, are working out in China. A lot of Chinese do fly into Italy, into that part of the world, with the designers, fashion designers, and a lot of things are then produced in China. So there's a lot. I know a lot of Italians in China, as it so happens, as I do Spanish, more so than Germans. So there is a tendency. A lot of Germans are, although they are going out to China, there's not I don't know as many as I do know Italians and Spanish. So it is to do with the travel. There's no doubt about it. When it comes to the countries in Southern Hemisphere in particular, some of the countries who are saying, well, it's going to miss us, we're okay, our immune systems are different, or with this, I don't think any country should take any chances or risks with this particular disease. It's coming wherever you are, in my view, and it's going to bite. And when it gets a grip in a population, it's going to bite very hard. And there's no only extreme lockdown measures are going to stop it from travelling around. And it's a question of so we know locking down the country stops the spread. It takes a couple of weeks to see the figures coming through, but it stops the spread. The question is, when you start unlocking those measures carefully, does it start spiking up again? And that's something we're going to have to see and look at carefully. Spain are talking about now unlocking some measures and letting some factories go back to work, and some other things, some cafes open and so on. It's going to be looked at very carefully as these things happen, because there's no antidote, there's no treatment, and this is a very, very fast spreading virus that can tackle anybody, and it's difficult to say, yeah, I'm okay from it, my body can handle it. It's proven that it takes young people out as well as old people. It's and in fact some old people have survived, whereas some young people have gone. It's difficult to say, well, how do I tackle it? Very difficult. Talk to you again soon. Cheers.